Welcome to the fastest stuff in town. Today we're learning Nazir page Lamed Tes. We are going to begin with the new Mishnah. It says the Masnisin, Stam Nazirus Lamed Yoim. Now that certainly doesn't seem to be a huge chiddush. We know, as we've seen already in the beginning of this Masechta, that if a person makes themselves into a Nazir and it doesn't specify it's for 30 days. So in this, Taisa says, you're right, we did learn this already in the first chapter, but I did a boy mistake listim. So because, as we're going to see in a moment in the Seifa, in which there is a chiddush, so therefore it kind of is just like a build-up with this statement which we are already familiar with. So then let's continue with the Mishnah. Gilach o shegilchu listim. Now, obviously, you're not supposed to cut your hair. But what if instead it was done by listim, which was something against your will, it was by force? So the Mishnah says, Saiser lamed yoim. The din is that it does cause a 30-day problem, which means, and we're going to see the rush on this in a second, that if you have only a few days left and they cut your hair, you have to have enough hair that it is a growth which takes 30 days. So if you look in the Mafarish, Mashma bin Oinis bin Baratzon, B'toichim in Naziruso, bin Nazirus Maruba, bin Nazirus Muetes, Ser Salamid Yoim, Lafi Shein Gidel Ser, B'pachas Salamid Yoim. So again, what exactly does that mean? That let's say you have 3 months left or a few years left. So we'll have to understand that. So actually, let's at this point look at the Rush. It says Stam Nazir Salam Yom Kvar Tinino El Velo Tani Hacha El Agav De Boilu Misni Seifa, which is what Taisa said. So Gil, what is that? Gilach Hoshaguhu listim, if bandits shaved you, Saiser Lamed Yoim. So perish Saiser Ad Shielo Gidol Seir Shel Lamed Yom, which means that you have to wait from the time that they cut your hair 30 more days. Biyom Tegalacha Shel Mitzvah, when it comes to the shaving of the mitzvah, which is done at the end of your Nazirus. Kigon. Im golchuhu biyom mulois. Let's say they shaved you at the last day, sarchlin uslam yom. Pamacheres, you have to do it with another 30 days. However, im golchuhu li'achar ches. Let's say it was only after 8 days. Moinem mixas ka'oisin yomim ches. Hisham lehim naziruso kidei shehelo gidol ser shalam yom biyom tigalacha shel mitzvah. So basically, you would only have to wait another 20 days in that situation. Since they cut it at day 8, so you really had only 22 more. You had 22 more days. Again, if you, let's say they cut it after 8 days, so moinim mixes kaisin yomim ches. You have to count like another 8 days in order to be able to get to the 30. So in other words, it's not always that it has to be for 30 days. It's just that from the time when you get to the Galacha Shel Mitzvah, you have not had your hair cut for 30 days. Okay. Then the Mishnah concludes, Nazir Shigilach. Let's say you have a Nazir that did shave his hair, Bein Bazug, whether it's with scissors, Bein Batar, or the razor, O She Sifsaf, Kol Shehu Chayim, or if you plucked it out even the smallest amount, that also you're going to be chayiv. So if we look at this Taisvus, Nazir Shegilach Bein b'misparayim o shesif seif pirish talash, you ripped it out, plucked it out, kolshu. Afilu seir echad, even if you rip out only one hair, loke, a love. Mayri, we're talking about she'oiker hashir mi'ikadai, that literally it was completely ripped from its source. Umashchiso min ashirish kaintar, just like a razor removes the hair from its very root, so too when it comes to here. The loka mikra lo yaver al rosho, the marvina and bigmar shar hamavirin. Any way that you can completely remove your hair, then you're violated. But let's say you would take scissors and you would just trim the tip of your hair like this, even though you're not supposed to. But in that situation, that's not kain tar. It has to be that when you cut the hair, or whatever mechanism you use, it has to literally uproot the hair from its source, like a razor would do. So says the Gemara, the Gemara wonders, and this is so fascinating, this question, and how they deduce and get to the answer. Hi Mazia, when it comes to the growth of hair, so if I had hair and all of a sudden it's growing longer and longer, so the question is it milatachas Ravi or mil'il? Lamai nafkamina. So when a person has their hair growing, is it growing more, when it keeps growing, is it growing from here up this way, it just keeps growing? Or is it that the hair is actually growing from the root, and therefore it's expanding starting from the root of your hair? So that is the question. Basically, they want to figure out, and the Gemara is going to come up with a clear answer, how we know this, where does the hair grow from? Does it grow from the your actual scalp, or is it continued, the hair which is at the scalp, that stays, it doesn't move forward, but rather when the hair grows, it's growing from the tip outward. So it's an interesting question in which, again, we could probably study this scientifically, but the Gemara is going to give a very interesting, fascinating teretz in a second. But before we even get to that, l'may nafkamina, what's the difference? Which way your hair grows? You're not allowed to cut it anyway as a Nazir. So he says like this: L'Nazir sheguchuhu listim. Let's say again you have these bandits that did cut the hair. However, shirubo kadei lichayv roishali karo, but they didn't completely cut it off. It was at least enough that you could bend the top of the hair to the root. In other words, there's a little bit of hair left, and that it actually could be bent. Now, iamrit milatachas ravi naziros hoshakyo. If you want to tell me that it's from the bottom, so in that situation it was removed. Eli iamrit mila'el, that the hair grows from the top, ravi. So my de'aknish hakayim, the original hair is still intact. In other words, if the hair is growing further this way from the end of the hair, from the tip of the hair, so then even if they cut all of this off, but the original hair, which didn't move from the scalp, so he didn't really violate, didn't do anything. It was not considered to be a hashchasa. It wasn't a complete removing of the hair. On the other hand, if you say it's actually your hair, when it grows, it's from the root, and therefore it continues to go out from that point, so therefore they're cutting the hair, which was part of the original root, which is problematic. So if you look at the Mefarish, Mosachas Ravi Hilkach Lomai De'akdish Shakli, he cut that part off. V'sois in a zero. V'yamrin Mo'el Ravi, if it's from the tip, right? Hoyel B'sharbo K'dei Lichle Bo Roshel Yikaro, since he left a little bit left, D'iko Meimer D'mai De'akdish Koi Akati Islay L'Mavid T'galachas Mitzvah N'usaiser. The original hair is still there, in which when he made himself to a Nazir, so it shouldn't be Saiser or anything. So Tashma Maha Inva. So we can answer it when it comes to Inva Chaya, which is a living nit, is insect that's found, unfortunately, in people's hair sometimes. The Koyim Be'ikva, that it's found by the hair on the scalp, the binta. So that's where it's found. Now, Ravi Beresha. If you want to tell me that the way that it grows from tachas, from the bottom, if that's what happens, and therefore it grows from the actual root and it keeps moving out, so Beresha the binsa boilumekum, so the knit should be moving upwards. In other words, if it's attached to the roots of the hair, and then your hair keeps growing, so that knits shouldn't be found on the scalp anymore. They should continue to expand outward. So it must be a raya that in fact it's not multachas. Right? It says multachas Ravi agav chayusa nachas yosel inva. Doesn't have to mean that it stays in one place. They're living creatures. So as your hair may grow outward, it keeps moving back to the scalp. So it's not a raya. So again, this is the question. Again, did they cut the part, these listim, which was on the Nazir's head at the time that he was makabel his Nazirus, which is on the top and it was left over, is new growth. Or what is left is the original Nazir's hair, and they cut the new growth off. So Tashma, in Vamesa, what if instead of having a living creature, it's dead, right? So which means it shouldn't be moving. Bereish de Binsa, and again, it's found at the end of the hair. So if that's the case, if it's actually from the tip, so Ikva de Binta boil makem, that it should stay by the scalp, right? Because it's dead. So how is it by the front? Hasemnami mishum delespa chila sharuge sharig of ozl, because since it it can't hold onto the scalp, it ends up falling outwards, because again it's not alive, so therefore it ends up falling outwards that way. So it's not a raya looking at that. Tashma blurius dekushim, when it comes to this blurius, which is a unique haircut of the kushim, de baser de migadlin la rafia molatachas, after they cut their hair and they braid their hair, the knot that they tied ends up getting softer. So how is that happening? Right? It must be based on the growth of the hair. So hasimnami aidi de kamatahi meshichva de rafia. So basically, because of this hair, when he lies down on it, when he lies down on this hair, it loosens up. It doesn't have anything to do with, is the hair growing from the tip or is it growing from the scalp? It's just a reality that even, why is it getting loosened up? It's not based on any raya that the hair is growing in a particular direction. It's just that through use, it ends up getting loosened up, especially lying down on it. Tashma, sakrata de rafi amra motachas. When it comes to this red dye, also it loosens up from the bottom. The Tanya, and we learned also Vesu kad savoy sabia diiknoin chavrin, that when it came to these older people, they used to dye their hair so they didn't have the appearance of having gray hairs. As we continue to Lamed Testament Bays, and ikvi nimhoin, the roots of their hair are visible as white. Shmamina motachas Rabbi shmamina. So what do we see? Obviously that the hair which grows is coming from the root. And therefore, when the hair grows, that which is at the root of the hair is now further out. So the raya, interestingly enough, is that people who dye their hair, they dye their hair black, so if they don't care for the dyeing of it for a while, all of a sudden you're going to see that, yeah, their hair is still black, but you'll see that the roots of their hair all of a sudden are becoming white. So how is that possible? It's because the newest part of the hair is growing from the scalp. So what does that have to do with a Nazir? So too by a Nazir, he is seiser by this partial haircut. Because when he was made the Kabbalah of Nazirus, and then all of a sudden his hair grew out, so those listim did cut his hair, that part of the hair, and therefore it's seiser. Okay, so that's the answer. Let's look at question 8. Iboilhu hay mazim tachas Rabbi omul l'may nafkamina l'may nifshat. So the nafkamina, as we said, if listim cut his hair and they left a little bit of his hair left, is it seiser or not? And the answer is, it grows from umilotachas, from the bottom, which means from the root. And it says ve'enu seiser kivan dinishtayrbo sar nidroi. That, am I missing something here? That it's nishat demoltachas ravi, that it comes from the bottom, right? And therefore, as it grows, he's cut the hair, right? So, but for some reason, he wrote over here that the enu seiser kivan dinishtayrbo ser nidro. It's not seiser. I thought it makes more sense that it would be seiser. Let's look at this top taisus. Ziknam hasamach lesanter nira lavan. So you can see the white. Alma milatachas ravi. If V'huadin the miskartan when it comes to these dyes. Nami havi matzil lachuchi hachi the kemigadol hatzemer, that when the wool grows on right ein sof hatzemer hatzeva habehemat savua. Okay, so l'chayr that would mean that again the hair is growing out, which means that again if it was growing this way and the hair doesn't remain, the hair is still there, but since we're saying it's growing from the scalp, he did cut from that hair, so it is soiser. So let's look at this mafarish. Umadika Kaddish, that which he was Makadish, Hai Nazir, Shaklumine. They did cut it off. The boile lemister, and therefore it's going to be soiser. Malimne Naziris Acheris, he has to count new Naziris. Ki heichidil Kaddish Seir. So I'm not really sure why it says what it says there, but maybe that's a mistake. But it is soiser. Okay. Weiter. But we learned. Nazir shegilchuhu listim. Let's say you have listim that cut his hair. So maybe this is the point. Now we actually find that it's not sicer. So it is lister. So why does it say it's eno lister? The reason is because it's not talking about Achar Malois, that Achar Malois, when there's already the time of the cutting, which Taisa says B'yom Lamed, it's already the 30th day, right? So at that point, it's no longer going to be Seiser, even if they did cut the hair at that point. Umani Rabbi Lezer he di Omer Kol Achar Malois Zayin Seiser. That after Malois, you only count, it's only Seiser 7 days, says Taisus. What does it mean 7 for what? For cutting the hair? No. Im nitma ad shiyaz gimel v'zayin. Let's say you became tameh before you had the sprinkle of the 3rd and 7th. V'chein im galchuhu b'yom lamed. Even if you got a haircut on the 30th day, seiser zayin. It's only 7 days. Shel yochel galech te galachas nizr ad achar zayin. That it's only after 7 days. So, according to this is talking about Achar Malois. So my time to bless Yov Tegalachas Tahar min Tegalachas Toma. Ma Tegalachas Toma Shiva 7 days, because that's when you have to be Gimel Zayin of sprinkling. After Tegalachas Tahar is Shiva. The Kimul Rabbanan Kol Zayin Yoimin Asim Mazia Kedei Lichav Rosh Likar. And it's understood that for 7 days the bent hair will be able to touch its roots. So basically what is talking about here is he already finished the counting of 30 days. He just didn't do the ceremony yet. So then if he's tameh, he only has to wait for 7 days, which again is 7 days to be sprinkled on days 3 and 7. So too by the hair, if you cut li'achar malois, so he holds you wait 7 days to let the hair grow back a little bit. Okay. Okay, weiter. Nazir shigilach bein batar bein bazug o shesiv seif kol shu chayev. So you're going to be chayev just as long as it's in tar, that you remove the hair completely. Tanabanan tar ain't el tar, only no a razor. Tolish mirat sivs of kol shu menayin. Let's say you remove it by a cream, or again it was plucked out, even kol shehu. How do we know that in that situation you're going to be chayiv? Talmud Leimer kadishia gedel parasar roisho. Dear Rabbi Yeshaya. So that's what Rabbi Yeshaya holds. Rabbi Yonasan Omer. Rabbi Yonasan is chaylik, and he says tar ainli el tar mirat talush. How do we know if it's a mirat talush? That if you uproot it, detach it with cream or sif koshu potter, in that situation actually you're potter. Ivok siv kadishiyah. So how can he hold that if you use a mirat talish or sif that you're potter, but it says kadishiyah, and based on that we derive that l'char you should be chayiv. So remember di'im gilach lebatar, that if you use a razor, So it's just telling you that there's actually an additional isser. It's an asay and a lo say by using a razor. But if you don't use a razor, according to the sheet of Rabbi Yonasan, then you're not going to be chayav. Tani idach tar inli el tar talosh mirat sifs of koshu menayin tamudomer lo yavral roishay. So we're now from lo yavral rosho that also you're going to be chayav. Sofinu lo rabos kol davar for including everything. So matam lo tar lo yavral. Why does it mention a razor? Oh, that a razor lo yavral al rosho. It's anything. Lefi shlol amanu liskalachas achrayna shiabatar. So it's because we don't want to learn the tegalachas achrayna, which is the shaving for a mitzvah from a razor. Lin the mitzayra. So he says shlol amanu tegalachas achrayna shiabatar. Says the Mefarish, Shel Tahara Lachar Tishlum. You mean Nazir. So after you finish your days of counting as a Nazir, Shibatar, that should be with a razor. If he shall Kosav El Vigilach Aser, that just says shaving your hair. Rosh Nizro, Lakach Kosav Lachatar. Kan Shin Sarach Lamancha Sha'is Tegalachas Lotia El Batar. So it's coming to tell you that that's what you're supposed to be using, a razor, when it comes to the Tegalacha Shel Mitzvah. Well, Ma'anim Mitzayra, and we went out from Mitzayra, that much you can't do. You can't learn from a Mitzayra, so we can end it off Mem and Aleph. Shein Donin Kal Mechamor. Because you cannot learn from something which is Kal, which is a din by Nazir, from a Mitzayra, which is strict. L'hachmer love. Because by a Mitzayra, he cuts off all of his hair from his entire body. So that's why it's Chomer. A Nazir only cuts the hair of his head. However, a Mitzayra has to completely cut off his hair. So you can't learn out from a Mitzayra that when you have to use a tar, that also by a Nazir you have to use a tar. So therefore, since you can't learn out from a Mitzayra, so therefore that's the reason why you have to derive it from elsewhere. Rabbi Omer Eno Sarich, Hari Omer Tar, Loyav Al Roshai, Ad Melois. So it talks about using that a razor you should not pass until you finish the day. So atar amra achar melois lo tehitegulachas alatar. It's only saying that before you can't, but after melois, you should use a razor. It has to be with a razor. Iboksiv tar lo yavral roisho, but the pasuk says you're not allowed to pass a razor over your head, and therefore it's also. But the isser is removing hair in any way, not just with a razor. So why do we need this pasuk? So your answer is love mishnei lavin, that you're chayiv to lavin. Okay, let's see some questions over here. Okay, so question 9, which at least some of it we're going to see. So let me just mark this down first. This is going to be question 9, which for some reason I never marked down. So the question 9b is why it's more strict by a Mitzayra than by a Nazir. And as we said, Mitzayra is Megalach Gam Zikainai, also his beard. Mashkein HaNazir de Megalech Rosho Bovad. You only cut his hair. So therefore you can't learn out a tar from Mitzayra. Question 9a. My revusa kamashmal and tanda denakit kra de kadeshiel le shar mavirin tfei metanda denakit la mula yavor. So what's the difference? She says kamashmal revusa l iser afki ein kaititza legarim ikara, even if you didn't completely cut it off. So that's found in Taisus. TA 14, Nazir Shigilach Shalo Batar He'im Loike. So it's actually a machlokus, right? So if it's Bekain Tar, lucky. And according to Rabbi Lezer, low lucky. Shlo Kain Tar, Koyam low lucky. So it has to be Kain Tar. However, if it's not Kain Tar, if it's doesn't cut that far, then for sure you're not going to be chayiv. It's the whole machlokus between Yeshai and Rabbi Yonasan is if you use anything other than a razor, whether you're going to be chayiv is talking about specifically where it is Kain Tar, where you remove it completely. But if you don't remove it completely, then not. And this is also similar. Taisus brings this down as well on the previous Amud. So again, the whole machlokus is if it's kein tar. If it's not, then certainly not. TB 15. I got this question completely wrong. Nazir shigilach bezug kein tar. If it's kein tar, like a razor, imloke. Say it's a machlokus. Umahadin bezug shlo kein tar. Then you would not be chayav. Let's see what it says. Kein tar machlokas Rabbi Shimon Yonasan. Shlo kein tar inuloike adkan.